Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and when will this season finally end? Take me back to 2021. I'll even settle for some straight sets finals exits. And fresh off the plane from Cambodia is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonland. Yep, I'm back from my holiday in Cambodia, and I've even resisted the obvious gags, although I did have a cocktail at Raffles, and there's a picture of Jackie Onassis in 67, so after dead Kennedy. That's the promise. That's the only Cambodian gag I'll make, a holiday in Cambodian gag I'll make. Look, the best that can be said for that game is I can say for one thing for sure is that the anticipation walking to watch it in a sports bar in the, I guess what the equivalent of, I forget, I don't know the name of that place in Bali, but, you know, where they have all the sports bars and whatnot, was the same in my Melbourne jumper and my Cambodian scarf, red and blue Cambodian scarf. And it was equally, I felt like I was going to the MCG, albeit in 36-degree heat and humidity on the and walking out. You know, the feeling of losing and leaving the ground, so to speak, was just the same as it was leaving the MCG after all of those horrific close losses against Carlton. And the only positive is that instead of getting the cold train from Richmond Station back to Altona Way, I could, after a while of calming down, I could go down by the river and have barbecued chicken and enjoy the rest of the evening. But it was very dispiriting performance, wasn't it? And for a grand final performance, you know, to speak about 21, I'd be happy to go back to 23 and all of those games where we, you know, strangled the opposition and people were complaining about how dour we are. Well, give me a dour victory over yet another close loss to the Blues and yet another. You know, just I know I'm not saying the umpires cost us that game, but another performance by the umpires that is just, it's got beyond a joke. And I like literally, it's hard to understand. Like it's hard not to think that at some point in his career, and maybe over blocks of time in his career, Klas did something to the umpires, said something to the umpires, is somehow just universally unpopular with the umpires. Because I forgot to say it last week. How many non-holding the ball decisions did he get this week? And then one that possibly, you know, as a post on Demonland, two things can be right at the same time. It's a classic example of that. Is we were woeful for big parts of the match. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but so was the umpiring, and it had a material impact on the match. He has a kick from outside, or just on 50. Who knows what happens when we're 2 points down? Would have given us the lead potentially. Goes straight out the other end, and what can only be called a really soft off the ball for a kick not paid. And I mean, particularly galling, as I've banged on about, is the inconsistency. Is that one that Bowie, which was a poor bit of play by Bowie, just really needed to clear it quickly. It was unusual for him, but he barely tackled him. And like to pay that one and then not pay the Clary one was just, it's ruining my enjoyment of footy, I have to say. It's just really getting to me.
And they also got very early on 3 50-metre penalties that just, one of them was and I hate it, the inside the protected area, because they either don't pay it when it's clearly someone's run through, and then other times they pay it when the only thing the person who's infringed can do is just disappear in thin air. They're already there and they can't get out of it. Like,
and all three resulted in goals. If
I think all there.
It still wasn't clear. I haven't watched the replay, but one wasn't clear actually what had happened.
No, unless there was
it against track? There was one against track, or maybe it was verbal, you reckon?
Yeah, it could be. I don't know, because I was at the game and I haven't watched the replay, so I didn't Yeah.
But again, there was the inconsistency that is so frustrating, because at one point late in the game, or maybe it was in the third quarter, at a really critical time when, the big issue for us was we didn't take advantage of how much better we were than them in the third quarter. I mean, we smashed them off the park, as I'll talk about the stats file, in terms of our pressure. We just couldn't turn that into meaningful sort of scoreboard pressure. But
it's been the story of this year, though, that's where we've had dominance in games. And we've had those slow starts and all that, and that's a separate issue. But when and
it's actually an issue that has gone way right back to 22, hasn't it? Is not being able to convert periods of dominance onto scoreboard pressure. But I think it was Lindsay maybe who had the ball on sort of just inside the centre square, and that Carlton player followed a Melbourne player through, which is okay, so was inside the protected zone. But a second Carlton player was directly behind the Carlton player who was following the D's player, like in touching distance of whoever the Demon player had the ball, and wasn't paid. I was in this pub in Pub Street in Reap, screaming 50. Like I think the Cambodian bar staff must have thought 50 was some Cambodian Khmer god of some sort, because I could not believe it. Just could not believe it. And by the way, while I think about it, the shout out to I'm sitting there in my Demons jumper at the bar. The game's about to start, and someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you must be Bin Man," which I thought I was about to be arrested. But shout out to Flag 21, who was also in Cambodia on a holiday, who had obviously read my post in Demonland that day and watched the footy with me. So I had a D's tragic with me watching the game, and sharing the frustration at the very least.
Very good to hear. Really good. Well, let's just get into it. I'll just do a bit of our housekeeping, because each week we do invite our loyal listeners to support this podcast, and the best way you can do that is leave us a 5-star review. We don't want any money. Oh, we do, but the best way you can help us out is boost us by leaving a comment or some feedback, and as a token of our gratitude, we'll read that out, give you that a shout out on the show. Because Eltham Jack writes, "I'll be honest, when the D's are struggling, I tend to spiral. The losses sting more, the media noise gets louder, and it's easy to feel like the season is slipping away. But every time I throw on the Demonland podcast, it helps reset me. The boys break things down with such clarity and insight that gives me a better understanding of what's actually going on beyond the scoreboard. They strike the perfect balance between honest criticism and measured analysis. They don't panic, well, not much, and they don't rant, well, not much. They explain, and they genuinely love and care for the club. Tuning in each week feels like we're all part of something together, riding out the rough patches as one big red and blue family. So thanks, guys, for keeping things in perspective and helping me hang on to the belief when it gets tough." Thanks for that lovely review, Eltham Jack. And I must say, I do panic and I do rant. Keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and like just them to Eltham Jack, we'll give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, leave us some feedback. You can ask a question and share a comment, or like someone did this week, ask what their password for Demonland was. Unfortunately, I don't have that information. You will have to use the Forgot Password tool. You can listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. And in addition, you can also watch and listen on YouTube. Just search for Demonland Podcast to find our channel. And don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to connect with other passionate Demons fans, come and check out our forum at demonland.com. You can sign up and join in the conversation with fellow D supporters from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free, and you can post questions or comments for this show. And also you'll find endless discussions on all things Melbourne Demons, and you can you can commiserate with the rest of us. We're live every Monday, except for last week we weren't, but we're back live this week. It's Tuesday.
On a Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, but we're usually live on a Monday, 8 p.m. So come to demonland.com and check us out live if you want to do that. Chat room is not up and running. I'm going to get that running, but I'm waiting till the end of the season because the last time I did some update, it screwed the site up. I'm just going to wait till the season's ending. I don't want to ruin anything, so it will be back next year. Let me get into the match overview on a wintry night at the MCG. The Melbourne Demons' one-match winning streak came to an end, falling to a revitalised Carlton side by 8 points in a contest full of narrative tension and missed opportunity. Melbourne repeated many of the mistakes that have plagued them throughout a tumultuous 2025 campaign. Wasteful ball use, inconsistent pressure, and a failure to seize the moment. The D's playing in what was a milestone match for both Clayton Oliver and coach Simon Goodwin. They failed to honour the occasion with the intensity and polish that it demanded. For the fourth straight time, they fell to Carlton, each lost by less than a goal or two, and once again, despite having more scoring shots. As has become an unwelcome pattern, Melbourne started sluggishly, conceding early control and scoreboard momentum. Within 6 minutes, a goal-starved Charlie Curnow had 2 on the board, and the Blues had seized the psychological upper hand. Although the Demons briefly hit the lead in the third quarter after a Kozzy Pickett-led burst, they failed to maintain composure or capitalise on that momentum. And after Pickett's fourth goal put Melbourne in front at the 12-minute mark of the third term, the D's had the Blues on the ropes, but instead of stepping on their opposition's throat, the D's allowed the Blues to regain control. And from that point on till the end of the quarter, both teams had 4 scoring shots. Carlton converted theirs 3-1, and Melbourne did not, conceding 4, not conceding 4 behinds, but there were a couple of rushed and one kick behind, and that lapse ultimately proved costly. The ability to maintain pressure and finish dominance with goals had been symptomatic of Melbourne's decline since mid-2023. Their ball movement remained imprecise, switch kicks hung in the air, handballs floated into dangerous spots, and players often collided or ran into each other's space. A disconnected and messy forward structure allowed Carlton's defenders, particularly Jacob Wiedering, to dictate terms. Kozzy Pickett was the clear standout for the D's. Starting at centre bounces and bursting forward, he amassed 23 disposals and kicked a dazzling 5 goals, including boundary line snaps that defied physics. His pressure was equally potent, and for a time he appeared capable of winning the game off his own boot. Unfortunately, he had little consistent support. Bailey Fritsch continued his encouraging return to form with 20 disposals and 2 goals, presenting well and finishing cleanly. Max Gawn was another reliable contributor with 38 hit-outs and 19 touches. His ability to spread from the contest and provide structure across the ground kept Melbourne in the contest during key periods. Clayton Oliver worked tirelessly in his milestone match, showing heart and drive around stoppages, though not quite the damaging influence he's been in years past. Judd McVie and Trem Rivers also provided bursts of energy, but as a unit, Melbourne's efforts were patchy and disjointed. Jake Melksham, who entered the match with 14 goals from his previous 3 outings, found the going much tougher. Tasked with getting past Jacob Wiedering, he managed just 1 goal from 6 disposals. And Wiedering not only blanketed Melksham, but intercepted with authority, routinely killing Melbourne's forward thrusts. Stephen Maysnight took a grim turn in the third quarter when a high-speed collision with Carlton's forward Francis Evans left the latter concussed and bloodied with a missing tooth. May is set to face the tribunal, and with his own late-game concussion, he'll be unavailable for at least 1 week. The incident marred an already difficult night for the D's, who now faced both on-field and off-field scrutiny. The Demons' younger brigade showed signs of fatigue and inexperience, while Harvey Langford continued to impress with his poise and decision-making. Others appeared flat or overwhelmed. Forward entries were predictable and often played into the hands of Carlton's zone, with the Blues feasting on slow ball movement and poor spacing. And despite a lift in tempo after halftime, Melbourne lacked variety and speed in its attacking setup. The handball-heavy game plan backfired again with too many turnovers and not enough forward momentum. With 5 games remaining and finals firmly out of reach, Melbourne must use the remainder of the season to refresh and reset. Calls for personnel changes, including an injection of pace and useful energy, will only grow louder. A shake-up may be necessary, not just for form's sake, but to rekindle the hunger and spark that has clearly faded since their 2021 premiership triumph. Simon Goodwin labelled the result unacceptable, and for a club that once prided itself on relentless standards, fans are beginning to wonder how far those standards have slipped. This wasn't a loss to a top contender, it was a loss to a side coming off 4 straight defeats. That context only deepens the disappointment. The Demons once again failed to deliver when it mattered most. For all the brilliance of Pickett and the hard graft of Gawn and Oliver, the issue remains systemic disconnection, execution under pressure, mental lapses at critical moments. It's not just the Melbourne lost, it's how and how often they've done it this way before. And that's all I have to say on that.
Fantastic summary, Andy. Really terrific. And I think you touched on a couple of times, and at the end there, I guess one of the huge frustrations for all D's fans is how many games have there been just like that, where could have been, should have been, would have been. It's like
it's the Jekyll and Hyde, because the slow starts, and then there's some periods of brilliance, and we see things working and clicking, and then it just all stops, and either the pressure stops or something, and they get back again for brief glimpses. It's just not 4 quarters of effort, and it's not great.
Well, unfortunately, that's been, and I think there's a question about that. That's a new theme this year. I actually meant that if you go back to from 22 right through to now, there's so many times where statistically, we should have really won a much higher percentage of those games. And for me, as I've talked a fair bit about, I think a big part of that is our kicking skills and its impact on particularly scores from turnover. But the thing that we've added this year that's is exactly as you pointed out, 2 things that have really been noticeable this year is our inconsistent performances. As you said, I think that was been the hallmark under Goody. That how consistent our level of effort was, right? Not just in seasons, but also in matches. But this season, it's been a real theme. How many week to week, it's been really inconsistent, which arguably is a sort of understandable. At least potentially related to implementing a new game plan. That's always going to bring challenges to it. But that doesn't explain the inconsistent effort levels within games. And in particular this season, a really noticeable aspect has been how poorly we've started in a lot of games and been behind the 8 ball straight away. And it actually wasn't too bad. Like they were lucky to get away, and they got a 50 in that first quarter. I can't remember who against, and so they had some a bit of luck in that first. It was really the second quarter.
It's with those first things, they got a lot of, and it's happened to us a lot of opportunistic goals where the ball's hit the deck in the full and they've got it, and that's been even the last couple of years, and it's happened a lot this year. That's just been a killer for us.
Totally.
Obviously our backline's not as good as it once was, but just when that ball hits the deck, we don't kick those goals really in our forward line when that happens, but teams do it to us,
No, exactly. That's right. And funnily enough, I'll sort of touch on exactly that. But for me, the first quarter was not so bad. I actually haven't listened to Goody's presser, but I did see on Damon Land that he noted, he mentioned the first quarter, but it was really the second quarter.
I didn't see it, but I read that he had mentioned and made some parallels with the Gold Coast game, even though the scoreboard wasn't as damaging as that.
Well, it was really, though, the second quarter. As I note, how many games do you win when you have a goalless quarter of any of the quarters? And that second quarter was just terrible. It was like, I thought the first quarter was okay. They got a couple of lucky goals. I thought, they took advantage of their opportunities, but it felt like it was a 50-50 ball game. It didn't look like that. The second quarter we were just terrible. And so I was sitting there at this bar in Reap. And just think, come on, D's. And so, it was great that we had a second half bounce. We lost it still, but that is something that's been particularly evident this year. And it's just not, and that's not about method. That's not about implementing. That's about, I think there is a question about Goody, but I really think that's a large part about the players, and in particular the leaders. And the leaders have been inconsistent in their the way that they've impacted games. And this was another example where, for instance, Track, who's our, arguably our best player, maybe it's hard to say that. I mean, it's hard to argue against the idea that Kozzy's gone past him in terms of our best player. I mean, he's phenomenal, Kozzy, and it was another phenomenal performance, but he can't do it by himself. And Track was inconsistent in this game. And I thought, Claz, our other All-Australian gun, or one of our other All-Australian, wasn't inconsistent, but didn't have much X factor in the game, and good effort. But we need more from our All-Australians than that. So, yeah.
All right, you want to get into your stats files?
I do. All right. So not ordinarily I start the stats files with the player ratings, but for reasons that will become evident, I'll finish with that, and sort of the reason sort of relates to what I was just talking about then, in terms of the performance of our players. So where we could have / should have won this game, yet still lost it. In some ways, it's a classic example of the stats not telling the whole story. I think so. We dominated. We dominated the key stats that Goody would have wanted to dominate. In particular, transition, the contest, and pressure. Smashed them really. In terms of the stats, but it's not true, of course, that we dominated. The Blues, it was much more even sort of watching the game, and obviously particularly in the first, and even more so as we just discussed in the second quarter. It wasn't as if we were dominating the performance, but it is true to say statistically, and particularly in the second half, I haven't broken these down first half to second half. But we beat them in transition, which, as we've talked about all season, is a key metric in footy these days. How you transition the ball from the back half, 16.3 to 14.9 of the times transitioning from the back half. The chains scored defensive 50 to forward 50. We beat them by 6.2%, which is really quite a big beating for that stat. The others, defensive 50, we beat them. To score percentage, we beat them. Defensive half to forward 50%, we beat them. Defensive half to score percentage, we beat them as well. All those last four stats only just beat them. So we transitioned the ball okay, and certainly better than the Blues did on the night. But it's worth noting a couple of things. Blues are worse. They're probably one of the worst transition teams in the AFL. So, and more importantly, those data points that I just said, every one of them are still under AFL average. So, for instance, the one that defensive 50 to forward 50 percentage, 22.5%, which is pretty good, but the AFL average is 22.8, and that was our closest to AFL average. Whereas chain, which is an important one, scoring chain to score percentages from the back half was 16.3% of the time that we turned a chain from our back half into a score. Beat the Blues on the night, but again, the Blues are woeful at transitioning the footy. But what's important to note is that the AFL average for that data point is 20.6. So whilst we beat the Blues for those stats, we're again under AFL average for them. But one thing I didn't know, because it was hard to tell, I assume you went, Andy?
I did.
It was really hard to tell on the TV, but was it slippery? And it had been windy, hadn't it?
Yeah, so before the match started and at times during the match, there was that sort of misty rain. Right. So not heavy rain or even sort of, if anything, a bit of a light rain at times, mostly a misty. So yeah, there was a bit of grease. There were times I noticed that, we sort of fumbled the ball or slipped over. That was because of that.
I mean, that's important. That's worth noting for context, because those numbers, chaining it out from the back half, is always going to be impacted by any inclement weather, and particularly if it's wet, because it just makes those handballs harder to stick, or the kicks, more drop marks, and so so that's probably worth noting the context. Our pressure, speaking, as I said, we dominated on transition, or not dominated. We beat them on transition, but we definitely dominated on pressure. It was 170 in the first quarter, both teams, so it was split difference. We were down 3 in the first second, so 170 to 173. So our pressure was still okay, but then we were 178, and this is where I feel like we lost the game. We just didn't take advantage of this, because you could see it on the tele. It was a really good example of where you could see it visually, how much pressure we were applying. But we didn't go crazy. Like, it's 200 is elite, remember, 180. So we were 178 to their 148. And if I was a Blues fan, I would have been ropeable. And so both teams would have been ropeable. The pressure that the Blues applied was completely subpar. And so you'd be ropeable if you're a Blues fan on that. And I was rapeable as a D's fan for our inability to put any scoreboard pressure on. We were plus 30. It was 178 to 148. Plus 30 in that quarter for pressure is nuts. Was not much better for the Blues in the last quarter, 162 to our 178 and plus 16. I'll have to ask Willow this one, but for the match it was 174 to 164. You don't lose many games of footy, I suspect, if you win that pressure rating by plus 10. The Pies did so relatively often, sometimes in 23 with the method they played, but not anymore, they don't. And so I'd be guessing it would be vanishingly small the number of times a team would lose a pressure rating by 10 points and yet still win the game. As I mentioned, our transition was okay, but we only managed 21 points for points from defensive half. I could have done better there, obviously, 27.1, but we still beat the Blue is our season average for that stat. So that's something that we've improved on the entire season. Again, it's probably worth noting that it was wet, as you said, but we kept them to 20 points from transition. So we won that stat against giving up on average 37.3. So we conceded almost half as few points from the back half as we have our season average. Again, probably, points to both how poor the Blues are on transition, and also the as I noted, the conditions a little bit. Where we lost it. So what stats point to where we lost it, or help us understand why we lost it? I think it's really important to note, like, as much as it was frustrating that we didn't take advantage, in fact, our accuracy was actually pretty good, in part because of Kozzy. Kozzy would have, in one of those pinball games where you suddenly get a multi-ball bonus. He was unbelievable, wasn't he, in terms of his, just performance. But nonetheless, our accuracy was pretty good. Was as evidenced by our expected score of 71 only being 1 point more than our actual score of 70. So we can't actually blame our inaccuracy for that. The problem was for us that the Blues' accuracy was off the charts, as evidenced by the fact that their actual score of 78 was nearly 3 goals better than their expected score of 61. So you could say the Blues won because good kicking is good football. But I think if you dig a bit deeper on their accuracy, the key stat that points to why we lost, I think, even though the differential is not that massive, was scores from turnover once again. And that was the scores that they were the most accurate from, except for scores from centre bounce, which I think they were 2 goals straight. Didn't. But in this one, they scored 8 goals too. From on turnover. So we scored 5-7, had 12 scoring shots on turnover. They had 10 scoring shots on turnover. We didn't take advantage of our opportunities on turnover, and they certainly took advantage of their opportunities on turnover. So we lost that stat by 13. 50 points to 37, and that was, that's the game right there, I reckon. And I've not analysed their goals from turnover in terms of, where they were kicked from. I can actually, if you go to the stats file thread on Demonland, Willow's got those numbers where each score is from. So I didn't have time to look at that. But I suspect that their accuracy, 8 goals too, which is phenomenal accuracy scores from turnover, they just really hurt us, was at least in part a function of the gilt edge opportunities we coughed up on turnover. We gave them some good, really good turnovers, as evidenced by the fact that 31 of their 50 points on turnover that we conceded were forward half intercepts. So we were giving them some cherry turnovers. We were turning it over in our back half, in their forward half. And obviously, the closer you turn the ball over to the opponent's goal, the more likely they are to score. So, it's just that kicking coming out of the back half, again, has hurt us. It's a critical issue for us, has been for, has really been since 21, I'd argue. And in that time, the whole game of AFL footy is headed towards having a higher premium on not turning it over. So, 70% of scores now are from turnovers in AFL footy, where I think it was something like 50 or 60-40 in 21, maybe 50-50. For context, that was the 8th time we've given up 50 or more points from turnovers this season. Don't know where that ranks us, but we're actually not. I think I'm pretty sure Jay Rogan put a note on Demonland that I think we're 9th or 10th from scores from turnover, but still, nonetheless, not many teams would have given up. Only the bottom teams would have given up more, unsurprisingly, I suspect. And equally unsurprisingly, from those 8 games where we've given up 50 or more points from turnover, we've lost 7 of them. We've only won one of those games. So we've lost 7 of them. You don't win games of footy if you get coughing up 50 or more points from turnovers. And it's been a huge issue for us this season. It was again... in this match. And as I said, I think the key thing was 31 of those points were conceded from turnovers in, therefore, half our defensive half. And, any basic AFL team, and, it was 2 pretty average teams, it felt like, I have to say, watching, should punish you when you turn them over in your front, in your back half, in their front half. We were really anemic from clearances, I thought. The total clearances were 34 to 37, so we're down 3 for total clearances. Centre clearances down 1, 11 to 12. We just down from stoppage clearances 23 to 25. We were down first possessions, so they had 2 more possessions than us, 37 to their 39. First possession to clearance rate percentage, first possession to the how many times you turn, the percentage of times you turn that first possession to clearances, they edged us there 73% to 76. 73 is actually not too bad. The AFL average is 74.8, so it's not like we did terrible in that. But given we have Maxi, and, Pitney is an interesting one because Pitney always does well against Maxi. Or Maxi, he did a good job, I thought, as evidenced by hit-outs to advantage. It was only 11 to 8 plus 3 for Maxi. And Pitney is, I think he does a good job of bringing Maxi down to his, well, that's probably a bit unfair on him, not bringing him down to his level, but quelling his influence, I'd say, or matching him. And they were almost identically matched, as I'll note in a second, on player ratings. I think it was 10.3 to Pitney and 10.6 to Maxi. So given we've got Maxi, given we've got Clary, given we've got Track in there, and given we've got Kozzy, who had, again, the most number of centre bounce attendances, only, just for raw totals being -3 isn't really good enough on the night. And I think that's that's another theme this season. There was talk about Jonesy wanting to be a senior coach. Well, I don't want to be whacking Jonesy, but too much. But you've got to be judged on performances, and he's our midfield coach, and we're routinely, certainly not excelling in the midfield. Often, I've noted before, it's not really about raw clearance numbers, although that gives them a big territory advantage, and they're a territory team, so that was helpful, and they didn't smash us in it. But the so-so nature of our stoppage work was reflected in score from stoppages. Centre bounces, we scored 3 goals straight, 18 to their 2 goals straight, 12 plus 6. But around the ground, which is where we normally dominate teams when we're up and about, and when we win, we dominate this stat, was 2 goals, 3-15 to 2 goals, 4-16 for they had 1 more scoring shot than us for just and they scored 1 more point than us. So +5 for scores from stoppage is +5 scores from stoppage represents a loss, given we have Max, as I said. So, and particularly considering they had the edge in the raw total of number of scoring pressure. Now, I said that, clearances. I said that I'd leave the player ratings to last because I think it also points to the reason we lost. Let's have a look here. Skips. So looking at the player ratings for this game, we had our top-rated player, unsurprisingly, was Kozzy, 17.7, consistent right across, but no surprise how appalling we were in the second quarter. It was his lowest rate. He was -1.7 in that quarter, and it's really, when he's not up and about, it's really evident how the impact on the team. His score was the highest, 17.7. They had the 2 highest player rated players on the ground. That was Matthew Carroll I don't even know Matthew Carroll and Cripps.
There were quite a few Carlton players who I'd never heard of before.
I was about to say, like, who the hell's Matthew Carroll? And it shows my lack of interest in the Blues. But he was their highest rated player, the highest rated player on the ground, 19.5. Patrick Cripps was second, 19.1. Our highest rated player was Kozzy. The next, just as who the hell's that? The next one, the fourth highest rated player on the ground and was Cooper Lord. Good Lord, 15.6. But I think why I wanted just to highlight that is really it was a very average performance by a lot of our players at bottom line. Kozzy, he had his worst quarter that coincided with our worst quarter, which just unfortunately shows how dependent we've become on Kozzy. And next was a big drop-off, 17.7. Our second highest rated player was Salo, 14.8. Good game from him again. Good run of games he's had in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but that's a fair drop-off to, our second highest rated player only being 14.8. Tommy McDonald, in the continuing files of how in the hell did he get dropped at any stage this season, I reckon he's a damn good chance of finishing top 5 in the Bluey, despite not playing half a season. He was our third highest rated player, 13.8, and was serviceable, I thought, for most of the night. Fritter, he continued his good run of form, and I thought, just a shout out to Fritter. He was excellent. I thought his endeavour was just first class the entire game. I really enjoyed watching him play. Flag 21 said the same thing, and we both came to the same conclusion that he performed with the sort of energy and zest that that was so evidently missing. Maybe the fact that he had his first child was a factor in the first part of his season, but he's been terrific. So credit where credit's due for Fritter. I've been pretty critical of him this season. He's been terrific in the last couple of weeks, last 3 weeks really. And our fifth, rounding out top 5, was Trent Rivers, 12.7. So, that's a pretty low-rated match for us. I don't know what the average was, but pretty poor. And then I wanted to pick out a couple of our sort of senior players. And keeping in mind, we haven't talked about it, this was Clary's 200th game. So, you'd expect that the senior players would be well and truly up and about for their comrade in arms in Clary. Maxie had a quiet game, as I mentioned, 10.6. Clayton Oliver himself, 10.6. You go down track, only 6.9 in the last quarter when you really need your X factor up and about, your impact player winning a game of footy. He was negative 0.3 points in that last quarter for a total of 6.9. Only marginally ahead of Jack Viney on 6. So, our senior players really didn't sort of come to play. I hate that phrase, so our senior players didn't turn up. I hate that too. Our senior players didn't perform to the level that I would have hoped, given
I think you're looking for the word shit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's probably more accurate. And after 3 weeks of extraordinary footy, again, it shows the risk of relying on one player. Jakey Melksham had an average game down the bottom too. Xavier Lindsay was a bit of a worry, 0.8%. And the Colt, right holding up the bottom of the table, didn't look happy when he was subbed off, wasn't he, before it was him who came off, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes, didn't look happy, but geez, I don't know why. Like maybe hopefully he was unhappy with his own performance, not the fact that he got subbed off, because he had negative 1.2 for the game. So, to sum it all up in a pretty easily way is scores from turnover once again hurt us, and we had too many players who played, in your word, shit.
Yes, okay. Well,
except Kozzy. If there's anything that's come out of this train wreck of a season, then
Well, we've got a question on him coming up, so we can give him his. But he's just sensational. But before we get on to that, that's in a couple of questions' time, and we only have a couple tonight. But Kozzy, I sat, because it wasn't our home game. I sort of sat around. Hold on one second. Just got to stop that. I sat around, where I usually sit but I was almost right to the end of the bay, not quite behind the goals, but it's sort of in the forward pocket, I guess you would say, between the point post and sort of the 50-metre line. So I sort of was looking up the ground towards the it's not the punt road end. What's the other city end? I guess you would call it. I guess it is called that. So that's where I was sitting. So I got to watch Kozzy. So he attends every centre bounce that there is. But as soon as
90% of them,
as soon as that's the next stoppage, he's back down in the forward line. So I got to watch him. Particularly when he was kicking down, when they were kicking down the end I was at. He goes straight and becomes a forward. He doesn't hang around and does any of the other midfield, positional midfield stuff around the ground, which we all knew that anyway. But it was just, I don't usually sort of focus on that. But when you are positioned where they're running back, I saw him run back to the forward line every single time.
Well, it just shows we need two of him.
We absolutely need two of him, yes. All right, well, let's get into the listener questions. Before we get into it, a few people did reach out to commiserate with me, as regular listeners to the podcast will know. Well, I want to win every game, obviously. Our clashes with the Blues always feel a little bit more personal to me, as I've explained about growing up amongst all Carlton supporter mates, and especially in a season when we're out of the hunt for any silverware. In a so-called a dead rubber like this, it becomes my version of a grand final. And D-Rev writes, my only comment is that I'm so sorry, Andy, and share your pain. And Spirit of Norm Smith says, losing to Carlton, Andy, it hurt. It really hurt. Again, 4 close losses in a row to the Blues. And there's only one thing worse than losing to the Blues, and that's losing to them in a close one. And as Norm Smith pointed out, that's 4 close losses in a row. So you can only imagine. It's just my worst nightmare to happen in a season. The only thing worse would be losing them in a grand final under those circumstances as well. But at the moment, I would take getting into finals again.
Well, Andy, I have to say I was watching this game, as I said, in this pub in a place called Pub Street. And
what a great name for a pub. Very very well thought out.
Full of, on one of the other there were like 15, 20 televisions in this joint. On the other television, Australia was getting smashed by the Lions in the Union. So there was a bunch of up and about Poms in the place. But before the game, on the Fox coverage, they had just a little package of our heartbreaking losses, including, going back to the semi-final loss in 23. And
that was a hard one.
Jesus, that whole last play they played with with the Viney kick that ends up with the goal from the goal square. It was like, what are you doing, Fox?
That was
a bad one. So that was another positive I tell you from the game, is that I didn't have to walk out and deal with Carlton fans. And
I must say, you wouldn't have had to deal with many, because it was a very low attended game. I don't know if it was the cold, the bit wet before the game. It's Saturday night. People might have gone out. Dead rubber. Both teams are out of finals actions, out of finals contention. 40,000 from Melbourne Carlton. Not that we get like 90,000, but if we're both up and about.
The Blues fans.
Well, there weren't many. It didn't sound so loud when Melbourne kicked a goal either.
But it was a Blues home game, wasn't it?
But it was a Blues home game. But there was more of them than there were us. But really, for both teams, that's pretty grim crowd. But then again, that's the dead rubber late in the year.
And look, as I said, it's hard not to escape the feeling that it certainly looked like 2 bottom 4 teams playing off late in the year for not much, except whether their coaches are going to get sacked.
Well, that's the thing. Both coaches,
which coach is going to go first? So.
Well, if there's any consolation, I'm quite happy for Carlton to win their remaining games and keep their coach.
That's what I was saying. Keep Bossy.
That'll do me just fine. Don't let them grab whoever we want to wear after.
Yeah.
Anyway. Let's get into the questions proper. Travi14 writes, a game of two halves again. People won't agree, but I believe this showed we are on the right track. We showed what we can do, but that first half was diabolical. I have three major issues that have bugged me all year besides foot skills and wonder if the panel have noticed them as well. One, forward handballs that are loopy. They put the receiver under immediate pressure or turn it over directly to opposition. Number two, corralling instead of tackling. Teams this year have gone hard at the player and trying to knock the ball out as they do, putting on hard pressure and forcing a quick decision from the ball carrier. We seem to sit back and try corral often to the wrong foot, which at this level is unforgivable and allows the opposition territory. And number three, our tackling in general. We do not stick important tackles and often barely lay them or get broken easily. This needs to be addressed. Dark Horse says our skills are simply not good enough. Our handballing is never to our advantage. Our kicking is held up in the air and give time for the opposition to close down the target. What has happened to the ability to kick flatter and faster to a target? Our positioning is a mess. We crowd and rarely have someone to receive on the outside in the right position for that clean and quick break. We don't spread or set up outlets for clean transitions. Lazy says, it felt like we were caught in two minds with our ball movement. When we went fast from defence, we looked dangerous, but other times we just bombed it aimlessly to pockets. There will always be times to do that, but does it seem like there is too much confusion in our approach right now? Radish D says, the longer we persist on this trajectory, the worse it looks. Our best players with the longest contracts are often our poorest kicks. With the current strategy and personnel, it feels like we're locked into 3 to 4 years of mediocrity. Wise D-Man says, I think the most disturbing fact is the overwhelming majority of players on our list have either declined or simply not improved at all. Bowie and Kozzy have been outstanding, Chandler and Turner have improved, and ironically, Melksham has also improved. But outside of this, I'm struggling to find anyone else. For me, all the following regulars, Track, Oliver, Viney, Salem, Rivers, May, Lever, JVR, Sparrow, Petty, Fritsch, McVie, Windsor, Tolstrup and Langdon have all individually declined from their best football. That is damning. So, B-Man, there's a heap to unpack there. You don't, in terms of skills, ball movement, execution, you don't have to focus on all. It's nothing new that we haven't already talked about ad nauseum each week, and it's a big reason why we sit 6-12 this year and 7-17 over our last 24 games. It's grim.
It's grim. All excellent points, all excellent questions there. I agree with Travi 14. It may not feel like it, but I totally agree we're on the right track. I talked about this at length last week. And again on Demonland in terms of this during the week post is that the game is about moving the ball from the back half, and we are unquestionably doing that better now. We're unquestionably developing a new game plan. I think, Goody will deserve his wax in some regards, but one of them is he doesn't deserve wax for he's implementing a new game plan, and by many metrics really effectively. We are moving the ball from our back half much better than we have done in previous years. There's no doubt about it. He began that process of implementing a new game plan last year. By his own admission, blinked the back half of second year last year in order to maybe eke out enough wins to make finals by reverting back to a more straight down the line forward half sort of model that we'd used from 19 through to the end of 23. So there's absolutely I think that's a really good point from Travi 14. We saw a bit of it that the way that we're moving from the ball back half. So I actually sort of disagree a bit with the comment I think from Radish D that where is it? It was D that. The comment that we're a bit all over the place with how we're doing it. I think how we're moving the ball in the game plan.
I think that was lazy. We're caught in two minds with our ball movement. When we move fast from defence, we look dangerous, but other times we just bombed it aimlessly.
Well, that might be true in this game. That and as I said, we only scored 21 points from defensive half, and keeping in mind it was a bit wet, and defensively they were trying to do it. No, I think it was Dark Horse saying our positioning is a mess. I actually think. Yep. We don't spread or set up outlets for clean transition. In fact, we do. And ironically, the scores from turnover is, I think I mentioned this last week, pretty sure, or at least I wrote it on Dreamland during the week. It actually, in some respects, if you wanted to look at that in a positive sense, you cannot move the ball unless you're doing high risk kicks and handballs. You can't transition it, and so we could reduce the number of points from turnover easily by reverting back to a game plan that involved kicking at 50 metres down the line every time to max and then trying to win the contest when you hit the ground. That would automatically, by default, decrease the number of times we turn the ball over. So in some respects, the high scores from turnover is in part a function of trying to implement a game plan that demands that you take on handballs and kicks that are high risk in order to move the ball down the ground. But the point others are making is that the skills, as Dark Horse notes, our skills are simply not good enough, and I think that is true. And I think I've been guilty of focusing a lot on kicking to the sort of, and not focusing on the handball. So I also agree with the comments by Travi14 and others in that group in that group of questions, that our handballing and forward handballs are loopy or sloppy, or they're at their players' feet. And you watch the best teams at the moment; the handballs hit, and they're running into like what I talked about Langford last week, with those beautiful handballs that set up goals where the player doesn't have to break stride. I think that the problem for us is exactly as is noted, is our best players aren't great kicks. And I think, a lot of it too is, I think it's worth noting, is a function of a team that's looking tired. I've talked about it all season. I don't think our fitness is where it needs to be. You can't really be relying on Langford and, Windsor and our young players, can you? So when you're relying, and that's why I wanted to make the point about the player ratings. We needed a night where we needed our All-Australian players to stand up and have really huge games, and it didn't happen, except for Kozzy, who hasn't won an All-Australian yet, and there's a question about him soon about his All-Australian credentials, and I think he will. Just back to Travi 14s, I agree, those forward handballs, I think I've noted before, Goody's been trying to implement that method. A lot of teams are doing it as well. I think we're trying to implement it, but there's a skill issue. But, so often, and he's right, that, we're under pressure and we turn it over. So it'd be interesting to find some statistics as to how many of our turnovers come from handballs, as opposed to what the split between turnovers from mistakes from handballs as opposed to mistakes from kicks is. But, it certainly would be quite a number, and it felt like it was in this match. There were some really terrible ones. I think the corralling instead of tackling, and our tackling in general, I would agree with that. And I do wonder, though, again, whether at least partly that's a function of our fitness, because fitness isn't just aerobic fitness, it's strength. And in AFL footy, that's that combination that is such a tricky thing for the high performance, is they need to, it's aerobic and strength that they're trying to get right during the season. And, I think that I don't think that we've been fit or strong enough all season, and it always starts to tell in the back half of seasons, I think, and I think we saw that last night. But yeah, it's hard to disagree with any of the points made in that group of questions.
Next one, Travi14 says, I think Tolstrup, Windsor, Lindsay, Sharp now need to go back to VFL for a big chunk, or possibly the rest of the year, for form, and also to manage some workloads of the younger guys. Give Laurie, Seston, Menther a look now. Persist with Jefferson. We have nothing to lose there. He took a couple of great grabs, but overall let himself down. I think dropping him now would do more harm than good. Ross Millen says, how did you see Jefferson's game? He did some good things and some bad things. He works so hard to get in position and win the ball, then gives it away so easily with bad disposals. Usually I can say yay or nay, but I can't tell if he should be dropped or persisted with. Rostar says, keep Jeffo in, although, wow, he had some poor moments. Love Colt's energy, and I say keep him in, but he's got to show something better. Dark Horse 72 says, in regards to Jeffo's marking, every mark was a chest mark. He's got nice long arms. We need to get Big Benny Brown in to show him how. For those that have seen him in Casey games, does he mark out in front, or was he being nervous in the wet on game day? Even then, some bounced off his chest. For the remainder of the season, I want to see players who have been performing well at Casey given an extended run at AFL level, and crucially, they should play in the same positions they've been excelling in at VFL level. We need to find out which of them can execute the game plan required for 2026 and beyond. This directive needs to come from Goody and be set as a clear club policy. Regardless of whether some think certain players deserve a game or not, we have too many on our list who've never been given a proper opportunity at senior level. Some players will actually perform better when surrounded by quality teammates. We won't know until they've been given a chance. Doug Remus says, I think playing Tolstrup and Windsor in the seniors right now is doing more harm than good, both for the team and their own development. They look lost out there. If we're going to back in players, why not reward the informed Casey-listed guys like Laurie, Cully, Kenfield or Mentha? But Goodwin seems to stick with his favourites. Unless May is suspended, I expect only 1 or 2 changes, probably Spargo back in despite another underwhelming VFL performance. Tolstrup just isn't giving us anything at the moment. Why not inject some pace and energy? Let's have a look at Mentha or Brown. Bucknecked says, when are we going to see some of the new kids and when will those who haven't put in as they should be invited to play for Casey? So again, B-Man, bit to unpack with a couple of players there. How'd you see Jefferson's game this week? Is Colt doing enough? And who at Casey would you like to see be given a go at AFL level for the remainder of the year?
What did you think of from the ground perspective of being at the ground? What did you think of Jeffo's game?
I'm not convinced with him. I just don't think he takes enough marks. I know the bigger players take a lot longer to develop, but every time he gets his chance, like he took a mark and was having a shot at goal, and I don't know what happened with that kick. Just went off the side. Mate, you got to kick those.
Consider of a chest mark.
One bounced off his chest. Like I don't know. I want to love him. I want to like him. I was praying when he came in that him and JVR would be the future of our forward line, and
yeah.
Now
that goal, unless I'm conflating two situations, where he dropped the chest mark was like a sort of little microcosm of our season. I think it's the one, unless I'm conflating two circumstances. He dropped the absolute sitter after we did really good work to transition the ball. It was a beautiful bit of play. He dropped, should have been a Monty goal. And then we had, I think, 2 more opportunities in that same, after he dropped the ball, that same bit of play to score, and we still didn't. I said to Flag 21, how did we sort of conspire to not score in that circumstance? Like, again, it was we'd move the ball well down the ground, which is that point about how we're moving, and we just didn't turn it up. I feel like I agree with Jefferson. He really needs to bulk up. He looks like he's not yet sort of he needs another preseason. So he might just be one of those players that takes a while to get to that sort of AFL level strength. There are examples of it. And I quite like the way he gets up and down the ground. Personally, I'd be keeping him in the side.
I would agree with that. I think you just got to play him for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, and the sort of just taken in totality, those other comments, I agree. As a general thing, I totally agree. I think it's time to bite the bullet, and Colt, I really like. I think we've got something there, but geez, he's not been. I've been saying that for weeks, and he's not returning the favour by having a blinder at any stage. The best that can be said is the banana he kicked, So I could see the logic. I'd personally keep Windsor in the side, but I could see the argument for taking him out just for his performance. But I'd be keeping, to be honest, I'd be keeping all the younger players in the side and looking to, bringing in the Menthas. And if that means dropping some more senior players, and then so be it. I'd love to see Kenfield in the seniors. I know he's probably might be unfair at this stage to put him in there in terms of his development, given he had such a curtailed preseason, which, by the way, it's worth noting, say it every year, the significance of having an uninterrupted preseason is some of our young guns, or I'm thinking Lindsay, who was coming off his knee injury. So he had an interrupted preseason. McVee had an interrupted preseason. Who else? Colt did. Yeah, he also had an interrupted preseason. So it has a huge impact. I'd love to see Mentha get a run. I'm not sure about Brown. I don't know whether he's got the, skill set, but sure, but definitely I'd be looking at getting Kenfield in the side as, again, another player like had pneumonia. So he had almost no preseason, maybe only a month of it. So, but he's been fantastic and is exactly what we need. AJ, by sound of it, I didn't see any of the VFL game, but AJ had a pretty good game. I wouldn't mind him getting back into the side for some aggression. I'd be more thinking about dropping, JVR, who isn't that younger player, and having him just go back and working on some things, although, he's been serviceable in the last couple of weeks. But, you've got to if you're going to bring Kenfield in, one of the forwards, I think JVR's further along, obviously, and I think will be a gun, despite him plateauing out this year. I'd keep Jefferson. I'd love to see Kenfield in. I'd love to see Menther in. I'd like to see Cully in as well. I he's not quick, but I think he's got AFL level qualities. Those three players are the ones at Casey at the moment, and I do agree with the idea that, a player like Laurie, why not give him a run now so you can get a solid look at him? I mean, Laurie hasn't taken his opportunities, unfortunately, when he's come in, but it's been really unfair, like difficult for him. Maybe not unfair, but certainly difficult. The way he's he's often only got 1 or 2 weeks at a go, and then if you play him for the rest of the season, if you think he's part of the future. Menther is important for our future. I think Kenfield's important for our future, so I'd be getting both of them in, and I would like to see them give Laurie a good run at it. The other one that I'm not sure where he's at, though, is Seston. I think Seston, in part because he's an elite ball user, and it's exactly what we need. So I'd be prioritising anyone who can kick the ball well, and that's Seston, Laurie, and Menther, and anyone who could impact the contest. And so I guess that's AJ and Kenfield, but I'm really keen on seeing what Kenfield, even if he's not ready yet for AFL footy. They brought Turner in, if you remember, not long after his, halfway through his first season as a rookie after no preseason, or maybe one. They're the players I'd really like to have a look at. So I agree with that contention. Season's done and dusted. Now is time to try to have a look at some of those players and get them into the senior side. And perhaps it's time to, to put a player like even Clary, or like not for form reasons. His form's been okay, but just maybe to get a jump start on getting fit for next season, because I keep coming back to it. Our fitness is not there, and we need to get our best players and our younger players cherry ripe. They've obviously already flagged that Lever. It seems to me, reading between the lines, Lever's going to be put on ice for the rest of the season. Petty, I was really surprised about Petty, so maybe it's the same logic. And I'm not sure, I don't know about May. I know we're going to talk about that incident in a sec. I'm not sure where he's got concussion, isn't he? Hasn't he? So
yeah, I believe so. I saw that and I'll have a look in a moment. I saw the injury list was announced, but I haven't had a look in it, so I'm not sure. Right. But we'll cover that when we get into changes. We do have our good friend Terence on the line. Terence, welcome back to the Demonland podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, Andy. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Terrific. Okay, well, firstly, my apologies, Andy, because last week I wrote in and you read it out and you said, because we had won against North Melbourne, you said perhaps I'm the lucky charm, but clearly I'm not.
Didn't last very
long. So
I
apologise for that. It didn't last very long, but because I'm a little bit pessimistic, I think I'm actually a hindrance to the team, because I went down to the captain's run on Friday and I got an opportunity to speak for quite a few moments to Ed Langton, who didn't play very well. And then immediately after speaking to him, I went to speak to Stephen May, who also didn't play very well in some respects. And when I say that with Stephen, I said to him, you got to look after yourself, look after your body. We need you for a long time to come, and all of those kind of things. And then we were talking just a little while ago on the podcast about the fact that the uncertainty about our kicking out of defence. When he turned around, I can't remember which quarter it was, when he turned around and kicked backwards to Salem, and Salem didn't take the mark because it wasn't well placed, I thought, gee, I'm not sure if we actually want Stephen to stick around for a long time. So I don't know. I think I might have put the moz on both of them and the team at the moment. I am pleased to say, though, that being in Melbourne has been really terrific, because I did go to the Longford on Saturday night and sat just adjacent to Michael Hibbert. So it was nice to see Michael Hibbert, and I actually talked to him. Are you still hearing me?
Yes, of course. I'm just engrossed in
okay.
that.
I just heard something. And so at the end of the second quarter, I went over to him in as gentle way and, not threatening way as possible. I said, Michael, any chance of stripping and going out in the second half and playing and teaching the stripping into gear? I'm sorry, not stripping naked. Getting into gear and playing the second half and showing our guys how to actually kick to position. And he just laughed at that. And the other thing I'm a little bit conscious about, I'm staying with my sister in Heathmont, and lo and behold, a couple of days ago, Fritz electrical truck pulled up, doing some work for a neighbour a couple of houses down. So I did speak to his brother. I told him I wouldn't put it on social media or whatever, but I said, there is a bit of noise about Bailey, and he kind of gave me a knowing look without saying very much. So I took a little bit of comfort from that. I'm not saying he said one way or the other, okay, but I took a little bit of comfort from that, because it would be a shame for him to lose.
I mean, I don't know if you...
I think he might be staying.
Well, the way you just told the story sounded like the knowing look was like, he's out the door.
With all of that I'm trying information, you're going to have to move back from Belgium to Melbourne and start posting on Demonland as one of the track watchers, Terence. Like a few days in town, and you've got the inside oil on Hibbert's stripping,
exactly,
and where Fred is going to be.
Yeah, all right. Wrong choice of words. Wrong choice of words about stripping. Yeah, exactly. I used an American expression in terms of getting into strips, so I apologise for that. But yes, so I'd love to move back to Melbourne. So as I said, I promised him that I wouldn't make it social, but I took a little bit of comfort from the response that he gave me. So who knows? All right, I won't keep you any longer. I just wanted to again apologise, given that I know how important you felt this game was, Andy, and I look forward to hopefully turning around our situation when I go to the St Kilda game at Marble on Sunday. So catch up with a few people at home. So I'll let you go.
All right, fantastic.
Thanks so much for the podcast. It's terrific.
Good on you, Terence.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Terence. Really appreciate it, and have a safe trip back when you do return. Thank you.
I'll have to update the stats files, Andy. So 50-50, we lost it because of Terence's, but maybe we can we can up that if we get a win this week against Sainers.
Yeah, I've given up, all these, what do you call it, superstitions regarding football, because nothing that I've ever, nothing goes from week to week. It's the same. Otherwise, if there was something that was foolproof, we'd never lose a game. So, shave, don't shave, wear the same undies. None of it works. Sit in the same spot. Maybe Terence said that last week he sat in a spot near where we usually sit, big man, and this week he's in the long room or wherever in the MCC. You didn't stay in the same seat. You got to stay in the exact same seat. Otherwise, you're not going to win. Nah, all these superstitions. For
the days, Andy, of the thread on Demonland of it was great fun for a few years about breaking these embarrassing records.
We're going to have to bring that back.
We're making some records to break at a later point at the moment.
It's 4 close losses to Carlton. It's going to break break that record. All right, let's talk about something positive for a moment before we get back into the negative stuff shortly. Pitmaster says, having seen such a dominant few weeks from Kozzy with him attending about 90% centre bounces, I can't help wondering how much his absence in the first 3 weeks compromised our season. We started with a narrow loss to the Giants. It probably would have been a win with Kozzy playing even half as well as he did this week. If that 0-5 start never happened, players' confidence and trust in one another would have been so much stronger and a new game style easier to implement and perfect. Well, I don't know about that. Spirit Norm Smith says, Kozzy magic, we love him. He was exciting, and 5 goals again surely locks him in for All-Australian selection. He's the future for us. El Diablo 14 says, Kozzy is a superstar. Buck Naked says, Kozzy is special. Well, he certainly is. So, big man, will we see Kozzy Pickett donning an All-Australian Guernsey this season?
I certainly hope so. there seems to be a bit of a pattern with the All-Australian, and whether this is correct or it's just my anecdotal vibe, is that players need to be selected first in the squad. Is he?
Yeah, they do. No, well, they don't do the squad until
no.
the
Like
end of the year.
I know that they get picked from the squad, but like have to have a history of being there or thereabouts before they get selected. Or
if he has an outstanding year, which he has, I think he's 100%. He'll be in the squad for sure. Whether he makes the final team or not, that's up to the selectors and maybe his next 5 weeks. But he certainly deserves to be there or to be in the conversation. Absolutely. I don't think he needs to. If someone has an outstanding season, how can you say, well, you got to earn?
Well, it just seems like that sometimes. Every
Well,
year,
maybe,
there's players you think, well, he should have made the team, but he'll get his crack next year if he puts together another season. Maybe.
Well, it might be that the year after he has to do, but I think he'll have to be in the squad. If he doesn't make the squad, then I don't know what you have to do to make the squad.
Yeah, maybe before the end of didn't have time today to get these numbers for the season, so I'll do that actually before next week's show, or at least ahead of when the squad gets announced, because he deserves. I think he should be in the All-Australian side. He's by far the most damaging small forward in the AFL, at least from my perspective, and I haven't got the numbers at hand to back that claim.
And how many of those small forwards play the amount of minutes he does in the midfield? Even though, as I said, he's just doing the centre bounces, but he's still spending a significant amount of time.
Totally,
90% in those centre bounces.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Bobby Hill; he's dropped off this season.
He hasn't played the last 5 weeks for.
So that's true. He can't kick goals when he's not inside. That's very true. But he's the most consistent of the small forwards in terms of his output. Kozzy, he absolutely 100% should be in the All-Australian side. I think though it really, not wanting to make it a negative thing, but it just shows his performance. And as I said, his worst performance in terms of his rating was that second quarter, and our whole performance dropped off. It just shows, in some respect, that we don't have enough match winners at the moment, do we? Like how much he is a match winner, how much we rely on him, just stands out so much at the moment. And he's just an extraordinary player, so fun to watch. I was surprised when I saw he kicked 5 goals, and dominant performance for a small player who, as you said, runs through the middle and goes forward. His use of his body is fantastic in not just marking contests, but also how he sets up to create space ahead of him. And sometimes I find I just watch him at contests to see what he's going to do. He must just be just terrible to play on if you're tasked with locking him down. I'd say he's in my top 10 all-time favourite D's players, just because I enjoy, just like with the Wiz, the same thing. I just enjoy watching him so much, and his footy IQ is off the charts. It's unbelievable, his footy IQ. His ability to read the ball, his brain, he just thinks quicker than every other player on the ground, just about. It's one of the reasons I really want to love to see Mentha in the side, because so he doesn't necessarily have to go back from the centre bounce and immediately go forward, so that he can spend a bit more time around the ground and take some more stoppage, around the ground stoppages, give him a bit of a look in the midfield. Just on the midfield, it's a bit, I don't know whether it's because our young players are, flagging a bit as we approach the end of the season, which is to be expected, but they haven't really given Langford any time in the midfield. And I think as someone noted a couple of weeks ago in one of the questions, our midfield has been incredibly static in terms of who's been, playing in there. In this game, it was Kozzy had the equal most centre bounces attendances with 24, 92% of all centre bounces Kozzy was at. Ditto for Clayton Oliver, Maxi Gawn, obviously he had 23 and track 20, Viney, and that's it. And Van Ruin took 3 centre bounce hit outs. And outside of that, that's it. So no Rivers, no Langford, no one else. And that's the third week in a row, I think, where it's been pretty much the same. And as I say, I'm not sure whether that's a function of, I think last week maybe Lindsay took one but they certainly haven't been trying new players in the midfield, and which is maybe because the young players are tiring. But I mean, we've also struggled in the midfield in the last 3 weeks as well. So it's a real curiosity, and but getting back to Koz, the degree to which we're relying on him to play well to be in games is a concern. But he's El Diablo 14 is spot on. He's a superstar. Buck Naked is spot on. His special. Spirit of North Smith is, he's magic. He is the future for us. Totally agree with that. Super important. Cannot overestimate. I know I've been banging on about it, but re-signing him was so important for a range of reasons, not least of which keeping a player like Mentha at the club where there's some support in terms of other Aboriginal leaders, which Kozzy will become if he's not already a leader in the Aboriginal community and amongst the other Aboriginal players, and also attracting other Aboriginal players by having an environment in which Aboriginal players feel culturally safe and want to come to. And I think for all of the other stuff and not performing, the D's have done great work in that space, and a lot of that hinges around Kozzy and the work they've done to get back to country and to see his family, and just a wonderful player to watch. And with all the sort of doom and gloom of late in terms of our performance, the one shining light is Koz, and he's one player who's been super consistent. He's barely had a bad game all season. So getting back to the initial premise, agree. I'd be really disappointed if he's not in the All-Australian side.
Well said. Let's move on to the Stephen May incident. D in a kilt says we must talk about May's big hit on Carlton forward Francis Evans. We don't want to see results like what happened to Evans, especially if we are serious about eliminating concussion, and we must. But what gets up my goat is the hypocrisy. D's players are all too often on the receiving end of severe penalties when the AFL wants to make a statement. Remember the ridiculous 4-match suspension on Nibbler for a tackle that was seen every weekend until that point. Remember Kozzy was also heavily sanctioned because he had the audacity to be aggressive against a Pie star who over-egged the incident. The hypocrisy comes back to the Maynard 2023 incident where our beloved Angus Brayshaw's life was changed forever and was never to play footy again. May and Maynard are as very similar, both fiercely attacked the ball, yet with Maynard, the AFL made a rule change at the end of the season and he played the next game. May will not be given the same treatment, and frankly he shouldn't if we are serious about protecting the head. One pays the price, the other doesn't. The AFL will pay the price when the massive lawsuit comes. Travie14 says, anyone that thinks that Sherry was 100% suspendable and May isn't has red and blue goggles on. Whilst May couldn't do too much different, what he did was the one thing he couldn't do was going to be second to the ball, even if he was making a play at the ball. He made contact to the head. I'd say that's 3 weeks as well, or 0 with the AFL system, which is crazy. Spirit of Norm Smith says, surely the May incident was a split-second collision where both players are going to win the ball. The ball doesn't run, it pops up, and May arrives 0.00008 seconds late. His shoulder hits Evans high, accidental. His eyes are always on the footy. MRO Christian takes any opportunity to crucify the Ds. If he gets suspended, we will fight it. Will we fight it? Surely we must. Ds must stand up. So that's really a tough one, and I'll admit, it might be hard for me to take off my red and blue glasses. I'm 100% behind the AFL cracking down on intentional head knocks and the concussions that follow, but I think the key word is the intentional. And the AFL experts and commentators have been split on this incident this week that I've heard. And B-Man, I know you often get frustrated by the old school ex-players who go full macho mode in these situations, so I'm especially keen to hear your take in a moment. But from my perspective, I'm just not sure what else Stephen May could have done. The ball was clearly in dispute and both players were going at full speed. And if Maynard's biomechanist from the tribunal can calculate the momentum in this case, surely the same applies here. The Blues player simply got there a split second earlier. And here's the hypothetical. What if May had arrived first and his momentum had still resulted in the other player getting knocked out? Is he still going to be suspended? Or you flip it, if the Carlton player was late and May was the one concussed, would we be suspending the blue player? Where's the line on intent? The AFL is obsessed with figuring out a player's intention every time the ball goes out of bounds. So surely intent also matters here. So May, if he had lifted the elbow or jumped off the ground, then fine, throw the book at him. I would be fully behind that. But in this case, I just don't see what he could have done differently. And the optics are absolutely awful, the concussion, the lost tooth, the blood, whatever. And but should optics and the result dictate the suspension? I don't know. If the alternative is that May pulls out of the contest completely, we all know how the media would react. May's heart isn't in it. The D's are soft. Where's the killer instinct? That's a whole separate storm in an alternate universe. But will May be suspended? Most likely, probably will. Should the D's challenge it? I don't know. Definitely some grey areas when it comes to contact like this and intent's hard to prove, but it has to be part of the equation. Would I see it differently if the roles were reversed with the two players? Probably. It'd be one of the pitchforks out. But I'll take those rose-coloured glasses, the red and blue specks off now and throw it over to you, B-Man, and get your take on it. And I've got some audio here. I just saw it come up on Twitter because I was seeing. Do you know when the tribunal is? Is it?
No, I just looked on AFL.com.
I don't think it has been
on.
No. But I've got some. There's some audio from Buddy Franklin and Shane Crawford do a podcast together or something, and they just got a 50-second clip. Do you want to hear what they have to say on the end? I'm always because I saw Cripps was sort of defending Stephen May as well. Like a lot of current day players were sort of saying, I don't know what he could have done in the situation. This is what Cripps said. Cripps said, I don't understand what we want players to do. If that's a grand final. And Stephen May, hesitates, and Frank Evans, gets the ball. What do you do? So, and I saw him also talk as well, saying like, well, what do people expect Stephen May to do in that situation? So before I get your take, I'm interested to hear what Shane Crawford and Buddy Franklin. Buddy Franklin seems to be all over the place these days. Never said a word while he was playing footy, and now he's got a lot to say. So I just want to
make an income now.
I'm sure he got a nice pay packet while he was playing. Let's.
Stephen May, is he going to be suspended? Head high bump on Francis Evans, straight to the tribunal. I think it'll be going. What does he do in that situation? And it's a hard situation because you got to go. You can't really pull back, otherwise it'll look like you sort of haven't put in your very best effort. But it seemed as though he sort of did everything he possibly could. Lowered the shoulders, front on contact, didn't turn side on, went straight for the ball. I don't know what you do in that situation apart from what he did.
Well, I've been in this position multiple times and been suspended for it, so I know exactly what he's going through. I think the hard thing for Stephen May there is he's going for the ball. At the last second, he needs to protect himself. Like, it's easy for people to go, oh, well, he's braced his shoulder. It's like, well, what do you want him to do in that position? Just run like this, and then he hurts himself.
Yep.
It happens so quickly in the game. I think it's a split-second decision he needs to make. What do you want him to do in that position? Do you want him to lean with his head, and then he has a head clash?
But I would be making sure that I'd be getting up and demonstrating and saying, can you please tell me what do I do in this situation? How am I meant to approach it? Put it back on the tribunal. What am I meant to do?
Yeah, B-Man, interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, you know how much I've sort of talked about like the importance of protecting the head, and I said last week with Jerry about I was ropeable when the Roos took that to when they appealed that decision. I was just furious with North Melbourne, and I was pleased with the AFL for once in the sense of how quickly they chucked that out, basically. So just come on.
I think the situations are a little bit different.
I think they're really different. And I take 100% Trevi 14's point that if anyone thinks that was suspendable and May isn't, that I'm not sure about red and blue goggles on. I get that, and I'm really alert to that in terms of how I see the May incident. But I would argue that's why I'm not sure. I'm not sure with this whole thing whether it's my red and blue goggles talk. Yeah, that's why I don't know. Yeah, go on. I'm probably leaning the other way because I'm so pro them not. I'm pro not the bump, but the careless. I don't think it was careless I don't think they were similar because Jerry swung an arm, which only could have resulted in an injury, really. As I said last week, even if by happenstance he'd actually hit the ball, he would have hit the ball into Sparrow's head. So, so I found this really difficult. And that comment by that little bit of audio then is the first time I've heard any commentary about it. So, and I haven't even seen. I was watching the game for the first half with SEN because they didn't have the sound up. So I was listening to the radio and watching it. And so I didn't. And I turned it off. And at half time, all I saw was that incident repeated about 6 or 7 times with no sound. So I didn't hear any commentary from anyone. I did think I saw a headline that David King was keen for it to be suspended or thought it should be suspended.
Yeah, well, he did that, but him and Corns were on the opposite side, so I don't know if it was just a radio bit. When you the slow-mo doesn't help. The slow-mo of these things doesn't help.
The slow-mo doesn't. And if you just looked at the slow-mo, there is a slightest microscopic dip of the shoulder a little bit, but the slow-mo doesn't help.
But the dip is the dip of the shoulder, him bending down to get the ball, like.
Yeah, well, sort of. But there's a big difference in that this has gone straight to the tribunal, hasn't it?
Yes.
So it didn't go where the other one didn't. It got appealed. He appealed it, didn't he? So it didn't go straight to the. I'm right in saying that he got 3 weeks and they appealed it and it got upheld.
Yes, that's what happened. So May's gone straight to the tribunal. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So which I think points to the fact they only go straight to the tribunal in circumstances like this where it's really, really grey. So I actually think, before I give what I think.
Is it when it's really grey or when it's severe that he could get a much bigger. I think there's that too. Like if someone was to like king hit someone like really bang bang bang, I
don't think. Jerry was careless. From recollection and high impact, he was unconscious before he hit the ground. It was worse. The Jerry hit was much worse than this one. It just looked bad. Like it was bad, obviously, in terms of the impact. He had broken nose by the look of it, and I didn't realise he'd had his teeth done, or knocked out. But Sparrow was unconscious before he hit the ground. The Jerry one was much worse, I think. But they were both careless. Both was careless. But this one's gone. I presume, as I said, I haven't read anything about it or heard anything about it. But I presume it's gone straight to the tribunal because it's grey area, and I think the most likely outcome is he'll get off. Because it's just too difficult to determine, was it careless? I think so I really get the point about the red and blue goals and also I'm a bit aware of the potential sort of contradictions in my stances. Yeah. I think he'll get off. Where I do think there's a bit of a problem for Steve May, and I said it to the fellow I was watching the footy with, is the problem is that May didn't go immediately. Like that was forgetting the impact. I was annoyed that May didn't go immediately. He needed to immediately go. And so he created that ball in dispute. If you look at the whole play, not just the impact, when the ball was in dispute, there was a half-second delay before May decided that, oh, shit, I can get to that ball. That's
because
my ball.
He was also cognizant there was a guy he was on a guy who was going towards the goal square, and then he realised, I have to change, I have to go and get the ball because there's no one there.
And he wasn't. The other funny thing about it is he wasn't actually going for the ball. He remained upright, and Evans clipped his shoulder. And so if he'd been going for the ball, they would have gone head to head, and maybe that's what is to be expected. And then maybe he would have got the ball. Like that's the thing is he was a split second behind, and that was because you're right. It might have been because he was protecting his player, but for whatever reason, then maybe he should have pulled out of the contest. And I guess that's where we need to decide. That's my point about last week, where we are as a sport, because then your point is true that he would get. The industry would give it to him if he was deemed to have pulled out of a contest. But maybe that's where we need to get to. Maybe we need to get to a space where we're not saying as fans and media, oh, he's pulled out of a contest. The question for me is, did he have a duty of care? Could have he decided in that second that he wasn't going to get there and that some contact was inevitable? The other grey bit was it looked like a glancing blow at first.
Yeah, I thought, what's the guy carrying on about?
Surprised.
Yeah.
And the players didn't remonstrate in the way they did with Jerry. So I think that the comparison to Jerry isn't a sort of neat one or a good one. I think he'll get off. Whether he should, I know I'm prevaricating, but I've only seen it like the handful of times, and I haven't seen any commentary or seen it since. So I think he will get off. Should he get off? I think, not sure. I really don't know. I know it sounds.
I want to play this clip with Patrick Cripps. He's on a podcast with Tom Mitchell. And then I think it's Lockie Neal's there as well, but I'm not sure if he talks about it. But I just want to get, just because it's players who were playing. Cripps was the captain of the player who got knocked out.
Yeah.
I just want to hear
what about the incident in your game as well, Paddy, with May and Evans, which was unfortunate.
Tom Mitchell.
Looked like a pretty big hit, and you would have been close to it on ground. What was your take on that incident?
Yeah, it'd be good to get both your boys' view on it. It's a hard one. Like it was obviously a big hit. Like if I know what the media grab will be, but I sort of still going to talk in hypotheticals here. I reckon it's such a tough situation for both players because like when the ball's in dispute, like you guys can sort of elaborate more on this, but like as a young guy or a young kid coming in, you always talk like body line the ball, and when the ball's in dispute, like you want to go and win the ball. And I felt like if you take Carlton versus Melbourne out of it, I felt like both of them were trying to contest the ball. And then obviously you never want to see a player go injured. Obviously Frankie was courageous what he did. You never want to see a player get injured, but I just reckon it's so tough. Like I don't understand what we want May to do there. Like if that's a grand final and he hesitates and let's say Frankie gets the ball,
that's probably a headline, isn't it?
Yeah, what do you do? Like so. I never want to see that people go off in the game with head knocks, but I just think it's a really tough situation. There's obviously going to be a lot of speculation around it, but I don't know how you guys sort of saw the incident.
Yeah, well, his arms were down as we were talking about off air. I guess if you tuck up into that bump position, that's where you're probably in a little bit of trouble. But it is such a tough one. These decisions happen in a split second. Like I'm not sure if you saw that bump as well and you had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm similar to
Lockie
Paddy.
Neal.
Like growing up, you taught to win the ball first. Like I'm always trying to win the ball first rather than tackle or bump or whatever. But sometimes if you're a split second late or whatever, your body just reacts in a way that you're trying to protect yourself. And a lot of times that is looking like a bump motion. So it can look worse than what it is, especially when you slow everything down so much now as well. And it's a tough one. But unfortunately with concussion, a huge topic now, it puts it under the microscope even more now.
Yeah, just thought it'd be interesting to hear a couple of gun players who that's what they do. They that's what they've been taught.
But a key point was made. I'm not sure who made it, but he didn't brace. He didn't. It's different. Like he didn't elect to bump. That's the thing.
What they weren't saying, and it's hard because I'm showing you on our camera. They were saying how he put his arms down like that. He wasn't like he wasn't actually going up with his arms up to go in that bump position when your arms are across your chest or whatever. His arms were down by his side. That he intentionally wasn't bracing. He was going to cop it. And maybe they'll.
And that's why it's a bit different to Jerry because he didn't proactively choose to do something that then hurt the player. It was what he did do that was, where I think is the grey areas. Does he have a duty of care because he was second to the ball? But he didn't turn, he didn't brace, and he didn't do what Jerry did was swing the arm and clock him. So it wasn't, I think he'll get off. I think I'm pretty confident he'll get off. I'll be surprised if he gets suspended.
All right, well, we'll see. This time next week. He is going to miss this week with concussion from a separate incident, I believe.
Yeah.
Then why wasn't that one looked at? Let's move on. And this is an interesting one, and it's going to keep coming up. I dare say, Dr. Gonzo says, when will the pressure come on Goodwin? He's been trending downward for a long time now and seems incapable of arresting the decline. He had a great run for about 5 or 6 years and is forever etched in MFC history as a legend of the club, but his time is up. Along with Craig McRae, he's the only premiership coach not to coach in at least one other grand final since 1980, and McRae looks like he will achieve this this year. That's what the person writing is saying. Yes, we have deficiencies in the list, but a coach coaches to minimise those deficiencies and create an opportunity to win. We have a healthy list, and this is the best we've got. 7 wins and 17 losses over the past 24 games. If we don't make a change now, / this off-season, 2026 will be another wasted year, as I cannot imagine a world where he's offered a new contract. As the saying goes, more is lost by indecision than the wrong decision. A Roadstar says, the call for Goody's head is warranted, but I don't see who we replace him with or how that doesn't send us further into the doldrums for the next year or two. A crystal ball would be nice, and all decisions are easy in hindsight, but I don't think the club is flush with enough cash to take the $1 million plus financial hit to sack him now. I don't think the standards are getting driven hard enough at training, and there's some acceptance of mediocrity. Fab Demon says, what I find most staggering is the sheer drop-off in performance from this side. Even in 2022 and 2023, we were a competitive finals-bound team, capable of beating anyone and stringing together long winning runs. Goody wants us to believe that the disastrous result over the past 2 seasons are a part of some grand plan, a change in game style, development phase, or reset. I'm sorry, but I don't buy it anymore, if I ever did. There's little to no evidence that this team is improving or heading in the right direction despite some standout individual performances, like Kozzy's this year. That's not pessimism, it's just a realistic assessment of what we've seen week in, week out. It's not a one or occasional game thing. There has been a very real sustained decline over the last 2 seasons, a drop from premiership contenders to where we are satisfied beating cellar dwellers. The fact is we've won about 7 of our last 23 games. That is the reality of our situation. Goody never seems to take any accountability for the rapid decline of a side that once looked like a powerhouse. Nor do most of the senior players. My suspicion is that many of them, including Goody, are content simply being remembered as the group that ended the premiership drought. They climbed their mountain and now they're comfortable. Sadly, since the 1950s, this club has lacked any real tradition or culture of sustained success. Unqualified opinion says, how do you fix a club that has lost belief in itself? In 2021, we could run through walls, walk on water, win anywhere, anytime. Fast forward to 2025 and we can't land any punches. We have the ingredients to take it up to the top teams, but we, for some reason, bring a different mindset for the bottom teams. Is it off-field instability in key posts, CEO/president, high-performance team, head coach, line coaches, on-field leaders, bottom 6 on game day? In your humble opinion, how will we get back to the best version of ourselves? And Spirit of Norm Smith says, Can we withstand a rebuild? We were in the wilderness for 12 plus years after the 2006 season and our prior rebuild. Our finances and membership and relevance would be severely dented by another poor season next year. Harvey Wallbanger says, a simple question for the boys. The coach in his press conference was clearly angry with the first quarter effort on Saturday night and also referenced the even more anemic effort in the first quarter against the Gold Coast. Given that someone is accountable for those failures, which arguably cost us both games, who is it? The senior coach, the leadership group, the playing group generally, the head of football, the interim CEO, or the prospective CEO? A bit tongue-in-cheek in the last two. And Dina Kilt says, I can imagine there's another pile-on against Goody following the Carlton loss, but winning a flag is a whole-of-club thing. Strong board, CEO, management, player leaders, all united in a strong culture, all rowing the boat in the same direction. Not many get this right. The last 2 years there's been public infighting causing significant distraction to the board and CEO, which certainly distracts the coach. There is no coincidence that this infighting is reflected in the D's performances. Thankfully, all those who needed to leave have left and we appear to have peace on earth at the MFC again. Given we still don't have either President Stephen Smith or CEO Paul Guerra in place, Goody has been riding a 2-legged horse. I believe Smith and Guerra don't start until September. When they start, their professionalism will compel them to take stock of where we are at and ensure governance is strong. Then they start the process to get the club leadership aligned to a strong culture with everyone rowing in the same direction. Andy, I can imagine you want this question left to post-season, but the Goody pile-on is not healthy. What perspective do you two bring at this point? So I don't think the Goody question is going to go away anytime soon. And whether you believe in assigning blame or jumping on the pile is helpful or not, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have real discussion about the things where we are at the moment. And I think that the numbers speak very, very loudly for themselves. Back-to-back straight sets, final exits. circumstances around those. Just 17 wins from our last 41 games since the start of 2024. That's a 41% win rate. And more alarmingly, only 7, as guys have mentioned tonight, 7 wins from our last 24 matches. That's 29% win rate in the last, season when you count 24 matches. Can we really afford to go through another season like this in 2026? Or would we be better off ripping the Band-Aid off now and starting fresh? And the obvious question then becomes, can we afford to sack Simon financially? I don't know if $1 million is what's it's going to cost us. But maybe the better question is, can we afford not to? There's a lot of other factors involving another year of all the same of where we are now. And from where I'm sitting, I just can't see us improving where we are now. I cannot see us going in an upward trajectory from where we are now. I don't want to see token changes made in the off-season where 1 or 2 assistant coaches are shuffled around in the hope that there'll be some magical fix that fixes a deeper issue. That kind of superficial tinkering hasn't worked in the past. It's just not going to work. Would a completely new coaching group turn the tide and steer this ship back on course? And I honestly don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But what I do know is right now we do keep this shipping boating metaphor going. We look rudderless. We're taking on water. We're sinking. There's no clear horizon in sight. I think something's just got to give. I say this with no disrespect to Simon. He was the coach that led us to the promised land, something many of us never thought that we'd ever see in our lifetimes. And for that, I'm always going to be eternally grateful for the flag, the moment in 2021. It lives in my heart forever and ever. It's ingrained in my brain. But that gratitude and sentiment can't be the reason why we shy away from making some tough calls. I truly believe the time has come. It's at the season's end. I'm not saying to do anything now, but for the club to part ways with Goody. I know Big Man, you won't agree with me. And it's not just him. I think we need a full-scale clean-out across the coaching and high-performance departments, and perhaps some hard decisions on some players will have to be made too, and I'm sure that they will be made in the off-season, whether it's a neutral decision or not, either way. The leadership team had a golden opportunity. They oversaw 3 outstanding home and away seasons, which we all loved. It gave us so many memorable wins. They built a side that looked like it could dominate an era. But at the end of the day, they failed to capitalise on that. 2 straight sets finals exits, opportunities lost, and your premierships are bloody hard to win. We know that. Finals are brutal. The margins are razor thin, and every mistake is magnified. And yet we kept making those same errors. We're still making some of those same errors now. They're kicking cost us in that 2023 season that we could have won a premiership. And yet we're still making, we failed when it mattered most. And now, after scaling that mountain, we've tumbled all the way back down again. We're not quite at rock bottom now, and hopefully we don't go back to rock bottom, but we're not far off it. And to go from a feared powerhouse to a side that has become an easy beats, it's easy beats, but we can't win. It's heartbreaking, and we haven't copped too many beltings, to everyone's credit. And we've pushed some good sides, but the fact remains we're progressively falling short over and over again. We're making the same mistakes again and again and again. The killer instinct, I think, is gone, and now we still have a talented list, but we can't finish quarters. We're not finishing out games. Skills have deteriorated, but we've all seen it. Players have regressed. Something is fundamentally broken. I don't know if it's in the head or I don't know what it is. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to stick back and accept mediocrity anymore. I'm not going to rant about it like I did earlier in the season, but the mindset of settling for second best and just being happy with the same old, being dished up weekend, it's haunted this club for most of my life. And why should we accept it now? After we've known how it feels to be up the top. We have those, as mentioned, we have those 3 incredible seasons, and we know what it feels like to be one of the best and go to games. Most games I went to, and I've never felt that in my life, that we would win. I never, ever have I experienced that in my Melbourne support. I knew we'd win, or I'd be a very, very good chance of winning most weeks. That's gone. That's almost a distant memory. What we're watching now is not even a shadow of what once were a couple of just a few short years ago. And deep down, I think most of us know that we're not getting back to that with the current setup. So, they're doing things on the fly, but it's just not working. So hard decisions need to be made in the off season, not band-aids, not half measures, real change. I think it's an absolute disgrace. And I hadn't prepared any notes on this, but the fact that we don't have a president, I know Greeny's doing a good job. We've got Stephen Smith coming in, but he's not here and he needs a holiday, whatever, that's fine. But no CEO this whole year, that's an absolute fucking disgrace. I'm sorry, I didn't want to swear there, but it just is. And as someone said, Goody, it doesn't help Goody out. He's running on a two-legged horse. It's just a disgrace. I think we as supporters and paid-up members deserve so much better. And I think we should demand much better, and things have to change because it can't stay the way it is. I know, Big Man, you probably could disagree with some of that, but I think something has to change. It doesn't mean that the change will turn things around, but we're not going to turn around with the current setup. That's all I have to say on that. Big Man, feel free to tell me I'm overreacting.
No. Look, I think no, not at all. Like I think you captured exactly how a lot of fans feel. Probably, to be honest, probably the overwhelming majority of fans feel, and it's increasingly becoming a harder sort of to counter that argument. What I would say is that. Having backed a lot of two-legged horses, I've got a bit of experience in that space about how ineffectual it is, and I don't think it can be overstated. So it's a bit like what I've said about even with stats or a whole range of things is that you diagnose the problem there, which is essentially what you said. What is it? 17 out of 42 games,
7 wins. 17 losses in
29%, win-loss ratio.
That's in a season, like 24 games. That's
the problem. Good. And so we know what the problem is. The challenge, of course, is, well, what's the solution? And I just think it's as I've made this argument before, I just think it's too simplistic to say that the solution is getting rid of Goody. So everyone gets up in their fields.
You can't get rid of all the players, though. What are you going to do?
Well, we have to get. Well, I think as I've made you can't get rid of all the players, but for instance, we could have bitten the bullet and taken what we had for Petty, for instance.
Yeah, in hindsight. But at the time, I didn't want to do that. But in hindsight, we should have absolutely done it.
But this goes to
2020 hindsight.
Leaving aside the sort of, I just think that that it's problematical to say, the implication is if, like, you take on board what you're saying, and I think that's you've made a really, really strong argument. And as I say, I think to be honest, the overwhelming majority of D's fans would say, "Yep, spot on, Andy. You've nailed it." I just think that the implication of saying let's get a new coach is that whether it's meant or not, the implication is that's the issue. And I would say, like, I totally agree with what you said at the end, but also D, and a Kilt's point is, and I've made this point over and over again over the last few years on the podcast, is successful clubs have successful and effective governance. We are all over the shop once again. The only time that we have had a strong governance is in place where things have run well was when Peter Jackson came in
what happened?
And sorted out governance.
We won a flag from it.
Right. And as you pointed out, we've got an interim president with supposedly one who is, it's like it's a given. It would appear that Stephen Smith is going to become the president. Yeah. We've got a CEO that we appointed to medium level of fanfare who is not beginning to September. So our governance is all over the shop once again. And so therefore, we're in trouble. I would argue that the high performance program is a bigger issue. Now, that's a whole of club thing. And the problem of those two things, of not having a president, having an interim president, and one not coming into the end of the season, and having a CEO not beginning into the end of the season, is you can't make those hard calls about your senior coach at the end of the season. More importantly, I would argue the high performance program is of more significance. And so what I was going to say about the other thing I was going to say is about selection. So there's two ways of looking at selections. What I would do if I was senior coach, who would I bring in, what I think will happen. So leaving aside my view on Simon Goodwin, so I don't think he is the issue to what to the same degree that you do, for instance. But
could I just interject? I'll just interject quickly, and you can go on. I don't think Goody will be there at the end of the next year. Like, he'll be gone, whether he goes halfway through they won't give him a contract at the end of next year. So I'm reading the tea leaves. What's going to happen? Saying, let's do it now. Let's get this ball rolling. I don't know if it's too soon. But yeah, I take your point. We've got no one steering the ship. It's nothing to go negative against Brad Green. I think under the circumstances, he's doing a great job. He's sort of galvanised everything, doing as best he can. But it's a Band-Aid solution.
But they can't. That's my point about governance. It's like, you can't. Who's going to make that decision now?
Well, I know. Right? That's why. Why are we in this situation? Why do we not have a CEO? Why don't we have a president?
50 years,
I know. It's a disgrace because we accept mediocrity. That's why.
Well, we've got poor governance. Like, that's
I know.
Function. To me, that's the core of the thingo. So the coach is the symptom, or not the symptom. Of course, they're an important part of the puzzle. So is the high performance, but all programs. So is the players. Yeah. So is the footy department. So is your coach, your line coaches. All of those things come together. They're all of the thingo. But for me, the bedrock of any successful organisation and football club is strong governance, strong off-board, strong CEO. That there is good governance in place, and we've rarely had it in the entire time I've barracked for Melbourne. And I think that's the issue. That's what we need to do. What will happen? I would be shocked if he gets sacked. I can see the argument for it. I don't think he will. So I think that these fans need to buckle up and accept the fact that the most likely outcome, whether people think it should happen or not happen, I cannot see him getting sacked. In large, at the end of this season, I see him, the $1 million is just one factor. I see him getting reappointed for next season. What happens if we go on?
He's not reappointed. He's contracted. So
yeah, exactly. He's got a contract in place. But because of the governance situation, we're not really in a position to be making that decision. So I think that particularly for fans like yourself, I hear exactly what you're saying. As I said, I can see that argument, and certainly it gets stronger every week, every time we're dissecting a loss. But I think he'll get reappointed, or not reappointed. He'll see out his contract, and you might well be right. The most likely outcome is that he will finish his time at the D's at the end of the season. But what happens if we go on and make the finals? I know you say, well, we're not likely to, but I think there's every chance we might if we can get our off-field stuff right, and if we get fitter. So, I hear what you're saying and don't, disagree with the thrust of it. I just think that the off-field stuff has got to get right first, and everything else is window dressing to a large degree.
Yeah, all right. wasn't planning on
Andy, that wasn't over the top. And as I say, I think that what you just said probably reflects the overwhelming majority of where D's fans are at.
Yeah, and it's not as a nasty or negative thing. I mean, I know that, Dean Milan can be negative, especially in times like this, and it's no different to any other of the venues out there, social media, and
absolutely.
And it's WhatsApp groups. You should see how negative my Melbourne friends WhatsApp group is. I mean, it can be vicious at times. So this is what people are talking about in the pubs. People have a go to the negativity on deep. Well, what do you expect? It can't be all roses, and not.
Well, bottom line is it
can't just be
everyone says about footy, it's about winning, isn't it? And we're not winning. So,
and hardcore supporters who are passionate about this stuff and don't want to accept the mediocrity.
No, and
still rocking up every week. I'm not turning my back on the club.
The solution isn't always the most obvious one. It's about diagnosing what the problem is. Otherwise, you get into a bad cycle of making the wrong calls. Like for a start, I would be more focused on our playing list, as I've mentioned a number of times, than and I would be looking to trade out a player like Fritsch, for instance. As much as
there's going to be a lot of, it won't just be us looking to trade out. I think there's going to be a couple of players that want.
You've got to give up something to get something, and.
But there's going to be players that want
those decisions. You need to have a stable off-field board and CEO situation, and We
And
don't at the moment. We've got
all of
interim.
that, all of that as well affects trying to get players to come to us as well.
Yeah,
That's
of
been
course.
a problem too, because I don't think
Absolutely.
we've, our tradings the last few years haven't been great. I'm sorry to say.
And look, I agree with you about Brad Green. I think he's done a terrific job.
Yep. I love Brad Green. I hope he sticks around.
We shouldn't forget how chaotic it was last
who
season,
would have
near
wanted-
the end of it and off season.
Who would have wanted the job,
Yeah.
That's part of the problem, and I think he's
But we
done
need,
a really good job
going
to
back this game
galvanise.
against the Blues.
Yeah, okay.
We need our best players like Track having best on ground performances. That's what we need. That's what we needed on Saturday night. Is Clary, Track, Viney, Maxi, our senior players being our top 3 or 4 rated players on the ground. That's what we needed, and we didn't get that.
No. All right, let's talk about Casey. I know you didn't watch it. I didn't either. We've got a bit of a report here. The Casey Demons delivered a ferocious and clinical 4-quarter demolition of the undermanned Carlton reserves at Casey Fields on Sunday, storming to a 112-point victory. With 2 wins in succession and September aspirations still very much alive, this was a kind of percentage-boosting and belief-building result Casey needed. From the opening bounce, the Demons were switched on, aggressive and razor-sharp with their ball use. Though Carlton kicked the first goal of the match, it was merely a footnote. The Demons responded with 5 unanswered majors from 5 different players: Tom Campbell, Aidan Johnson, Harrison Petty, Jai Cully and Mitch Hardy. Well, Petty didn't get a recall directly to the seniors.
That was amazing.
Maybe it's because of the concussion that he had 2 weeks off. It needed some match fitness. Signalling the beginning of a long day for the Blues. What followed was a masterclass in dominance with Casey. A few years ago, we could have got 2 first-round picks for him. What followed was a masterclass in dominance with Casey methodically picking apart their opponents across all 4 quarters. Casey's ruck duo of Tom Campbell and Will Varell provided a platform of ascendancy, winning hitouts with ease and feeding a midfield brigade that was relentless at ground level. Jack Billings and Riley Bonner were prolific, each amassing 32 disposals, while Mitch Hardy, 26, Deacon Smith, 25, and Bailey Laurie, 24, consistently surged the ball forward or intercepted at will. The midfield's connection to the forward line was seamless. There was no waste. Whether it was fast break or a grinding passage of play, Casey transitioned from stoppage to scoring opportunity with composure and speed. Returning from suspension and injury, Aidan Johnson played like a man possessed. The dynamic forward imposed himself on the game with strong marks and relentless pressure, kicking 4 goals by halftime and finishing with 5 for the day. His 22 disposals and 11 marks capped off a best-on-ground performance. Luca Kemfield, a mid-season draftee last year whose progress has been hindered by health setbacks, was another standout. After a quieter first half, he exploded after the break with 4 goals, presenting strongly and converting with confidence. His form surge comes at a perfect time for the club as they hunt for September firepower. That's Casey, not the D's. Several players used this game to bolster their cases for AFL selection. Harry Petty, recently cleared from concussion protocols, looked in fine touch with 2 goals and a solid presence up forward. Blake Howes, unlucky to miss senior selection last week, mopped up everything in defence and drove Casey forward with trademark run and carry. Mitch Hardy once again proved his worth in the forward half, kicking 3 goals in a crafty performance. Charlie Spargo chipped in with 2 of his own and, like Billings and Laurie's, made a clear statement to senior selectors. First gamer Jack Ferraro added his name to the score sheet with 2 goals, including one in the opening quarter that saw his teammates mob him in celebration and looked more than comfortable at VFL level. Another eye-catching contributor was NGA prospect Ricky Mentha Jr., whose speed and evasiveness offered a glimpse of future excitement, drawing comparisons to his mentor Kozzy Pickett. Though still raw, his flashes of brilliance hinted at his potential. Riley Bonner was instrumental in organising the back line, setting up several attacking chains with precise kicking and calm decision-making under pressure. Casey's ability to rebound from Carlton's limited forward thrusts, often converting defence into goals within moments, was a highlight of the day and a testament to the team's cohesion and clarity. While the performance was nearly flawless, it's important to note the disparity in list depth. Carlton's VFL outfit was severely weakened by injuries to their senior team, forcing them to field multiple debutants and lacking the cohesion and experience to match a Casey side brimming with AFL listed players and fringe talent desperate to impress after a tough night for the Melbourne seniors. Nevertheless, Casey did what good sides must do against weakened opponents: apply the foot to the throat and never let up. It was a ruthless display of maturity and intent. With 3 rounds remaining, Casey now sits just a half a game outside the top 6. Next Sunday's clash with Sandringham, a curtain raiser for the AFL match later that day, looms as pivotal. Casey must guard against complacency, especially given their occasional habit of dropping games to lower-ranked sides. Sound familiar? But if they bring this level of pressure, polish and unity, they'll be a formidable force come September. So everyone, cancel all your holidays that you've booked for September. We've got Casey on the charge. Well, neither of us watch the games. Further comments.
But I read the Demonland thread after not knowing the result, and at least it from beginning to end, and it gave me some sort of. I needed something after the Carlton game, and it was like a little Panadol, just a little less of a headache. So
maybe that can be my Lightning premiership for the beating Carlton in the reserves. The Lightning premierships in junior footy.
Yeah.
All right.
Participation award.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to get. Yeah. All right, changes. St Kilda had up somewhere the injury list, which we'll go back to in a sec. Whether through suspension or concussion protocol, Stephen May will not be playing this week against the Saints. I've got a question from Dina Kilt, but I'll just go through. Tom Sparrow was listed as concussion test, so he may come back. I wasn't thinking about Tom Sparrow, but we'll see. Jack Henderson, groin, 1 week. Stephen May, concussion, 1 to 2 weeks. Ollie Seston, face, 4 weeks. Are they calling him ugly? Did he got a knock on the face? Jake Lever, ankle, TBC. I would say maybe we've seen the last of Lever this year. That ankle, it's bloody made of glass. Marty Hall is out for the season. Shane McAdam out for the season. Andy Benese Wakefield out for the season. Dina Kilt says, with May destined to be suspended for the rest of the season, well, it's not going to get 5 weeks, but anyway, would you trial Petty at fullback or have Tommy Mack fill that role? Tommy has been accomplished all season, delivers experience and leadership, and he's one of the best field kicks in the team. AFL success requires leadership in every line, forwards, mids and defence. With May out and Lever needing to get his body right, we have a dilemma, but T-Mac is 32 and Petty is just about to hit his prime as a key position player. So big man seems that the powers that be are desperate to turn Petty into a forward. They played him as a forward despite knowing that May, I think the game was played after hours, so they knew May was going to be out at least for 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks. Lever out, but they played him as a forward. T-Mac obviously is going to remain in the side. So with May out this week, we only got the 2 key position backs. What does Petty will probably most likely come back in, you would think. Where do we play?
I was amazed that he didn't come in last week, but you think he'll come back in for sure. In terms of ins, I mean, as I said, I'd be all up for Sharp coming out, like bringing in Mentha. I'd like to see Mentha and Kenfield. Yeah, where does that leave with Petty? Not quite so sure, but maybe even if Petty remains at Casey and brings Kenfield, I mean, they're the decisions about planning for next year, I think so. But I mean, I said last week I'd be surprised if Petty wasn't in. I was last week, so it is the opportunity to bring in younger players. We've come off a great performance. The other one, actually, that I'd forgotten about and didn't mention in my sort of talking about the players who need to probably get some AFL senior time is Howes back into the team. And I think he becomes an important player. I think, I just out of respect for T-Mac, I hope they don't drop him. I mean, he was our 3rd highest rated player, and I
don't think they'll drop him. They're not going to drop him now with May.
Well, they might if they bring Petty back in and play Petty back and Kenfield forward, for instance. But why you do that anyway? Because Petty's not a better player at the moment than T-Mac is. So you're right. So maybe it's keeping Petty at Casey and bringing Kenfield in. But to be honest, I'd say the more likely scenario is Petty coming in, Kenfield not coming in.
What about Aidan Johnson? Aidan Johnson kicked 5 goals. 11 marks. Played him earlier in the year.
Yeah, as I've said a number of times, I've been terrible at the selection bingo this year.
I don't know. I'm just,
suffice to say, I don't know who comes out. Sharp, perhaps. I'd like to see Mentha at least get a run. Howes is part of our future. Him to come back into the side, and I would imagine they'll bring Petty in. But I'm not sure who then comes out.
The Demons' last clash with the Saints in Alice Springs was nothing short of a disaster. Once again, we failed to start with any urgency and squandered countless opportunities in front of goal, kicking 21 behinds for the match, including a staggering 8 straight behinds in the final quarter alone, ultimately falling to a 28-point defeat. Since that fateful day, the Saints haven't registered a win, and to be fair, they've faced only final contenders and a resurgent Sydney side in the meantime, and Melbourne, on the other hand, have won just one in the interim, registering a spirited win over fellow cellar dweller North Melbourne. So, Big Man, do you think we'll continue our unfortunate trend of helping teams find some form, or can we break the cycle this week?
One of the most remarkable things is we're favourite for this game. And on Saints home deck, who you're right to say they have lost the last 6 on end. The Saints, I just looked before, the last win they had was against us.
What's the maximum I can put a bet on for?
If you don't punt would be my responsibility, but responsibly load up. Let me just contact
my bank manager because I got a sure thing here.
We were raging favourites against the Blues too, so that would have been a good one for you, Andy, to at least give some angst insurance. Their Saints aren't travelling great. I mean, they've won one less game than us for the season, so hence the odds.
Well, we really need to win this one.
Per game, so you reckon that we've got a major advantage there in the ruck? So, it's hard to be confident at the moment with our performance, but I think we'll win.
We need to win this one because I don't, if anything, and it's not about, of course I want to win, but I don't want to give Essendon a lower pick. We just have to finish higher than them. I know what affects.
Win. Go to the footy while he's in Australia. Otherwise, his jinx will be hardened into a fact. So I'll be going along, and I expect us to win. So I don't know why, but that what I noted before, I think, is a major advantage that Maxi, they're 18th for hit-outs, and I think we'll dominate in the ruck, and hopefully that will translate into both winning the stoppage, raw total, and scores from stoppage. If we can reduce the number of points we give up on turnover, I think we'll win the game.
Just having a look over their injury list.
We don't need to worry about the weather, at least.
No. I was going to look at the weather. Always at this time of the program have a quick sneaky look at the weather, but knowing our luck, the AFL probably opened the roof for us. Do we play a few? We do play another game of Marvel this year. We're playing the Eagles. How many people are going to go to the Eagles D's game?
I'll be there.
There will be 2 of us, at least, the cheer squad. A couple more.
Demon Army will be there.
And a couple of others, maybe. Yeah. That is going to be a very grim day. Bring your jacket because it'll be very cold in there.
Well, look, I'll tell you what, if we lose that game, the conversation about Goody might be a bit different, but let's cross that bridge if we come to it.
Ooh, yes. Okay. Well, that's. I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down. Did we say we wanted a shorter show? We're over 2 hours. Okay.
Not me tonight.
It's probably me. Probably my ranting. We'll be back to break down our round 20 match against the Saints. Thank you to, if you want to listen to the show live, 8 p.m, demonland.com on Monday nights. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. That was Eltham Jack. And thank you to our caller tonight, Terence, usually all the way from Belgium, but locally, I can't remember where he said he was staying, but somewhere in Melbourne. Thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. They do form an integral part of this show. That is a thank you to D-Rev, Spirit of Norm Smith, Travi14, Dark Horse 72, Lazy, Wise D-Man, Ross Milan, Roastar, Doug Reamer, Buck Naked, Pitmaster, El Diablo 14, Dina Kilt, Dr. Gonzo, Fab Demon, Unqualified Opinion, and Harvey Wallbanger. Thank you to all you guys, and thank you to everyone who does listen to the show. Thank you to my co-host, Big Man. And thank you again to our loyal listeners. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it out next week and give you a shout out. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!